All right, welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 8 in the discourse Nachamu 5672. It's the seventh. It is going to be the first class in chapter 46 Memvav. Even though we started like a little bit in the last class, but this is really where we're starting. Chapter 46, and this mimer, this discourse, which is discourse number 12 in the general book B'Shoshe Hekdimu. Okay, so as I mentioned to you in last class, we're actually holding over here at a very, very important junction, and that is that the entire subject that we've been discussing until now kind of comes to a conclusion over here. And now the discourse turns and contrasts the Or Pnimi from the Or Makif. So the last 12 discourses, we were developing the root and the source of the Oires Bekelim, the light that goes into vessels, which is referred to as Or Pnimi, or sometimes referred to as Mamala Kalalman. Or Pnimi means internalized light, and Mamala Kalalman, it's the light that vests itself in vessels. We were tracing it all the way from its very, very quintessential beginnings in the infinite light of God. And we were then talking about the Spheres Agnuzos, the hidden 10 spheres that are embedded in the Ein Sof. And we spoke that that's not just related to the Kalim, that's even in the Or. The Or is a different type of light, because from the very get-go, it's an Or that is meant to a recipient, even though it's in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, which brought us to the kind of differentiation that within the Or Ein Sof, it's nuanced in two levels. A more pneumistic Or Ein Sof, which means a deeper element of the Or Ein Sof, where the Or, the light, is all about God revealing himself. It has nothing to do with a revelation to somebody. And then there is the idea of the revelation is meant to be towards a world, towards a creation, towards something. And once there is that intention in the revelation, then the revelation is curtailed with some kind of a railing to keep the light focused in a certain direction. Now, obviously, and that's the Spheres Agnuzos, where there is a potential for 10, not a potential for infinity, although we're dealing in the infinite light. However, in this stage, as we discussed throughout the entire long discussion, in the last 12 discourses, this was the theme. This light is very indistinguishable from the regular Or Ein Sof, as we discussed it then and called it Or Ein Sof A versus Or Ein Sof B. Here we're talking about Or Ein Sof B is indistinguishable from Or Ein Sof A, and the emergence of the definitions and the limitations and the boundaries and the specifications take a long time until they emerge. For that, you're going to have the tzimtzum, the contraction. You're going to have the light re-emerging after the contraction as a light of the kav, which the light of the kav, as we discussed and mentioned in the last class, is already a kav. A kav is a line, and a line is made up of dots. And these dots are these 10 spheros. So there is already more, or already closer to a certain degree, to a illustration or to a revelation of spherot. But on this level, again, they're still enormously lofty and high and undefinable, and all the spheres seem to be utterly one simple light. But then when this Or is finally going to make its way into the world of Atzilos, that's the first place where you're going to begin to detect the Koyach HaGavul, the power of limitation of Hashem, which are spheres, because once the Oros settle into Kalim, once the lights go into vessels, which only happens in a substantial way in the world of Atzilus, and that's what's going to create the whole concept of Ma'alamata, up and down, as we discussed primarily in the last discourse and a half, is when we were talking about the Ma'alamata, the up and down, that there is a order, a hierarchy in creation between higher and lower, as we were talking about all the spheroids, how the mochen are higher than the midos is higher than malchus, and within the mochen itself, chachma is higher than bina, more light, essentially higher. All that discussion we've had in the last. All of this was here to explain this concept of Or Pnimi, which came to contrast, which is not the case with the Or Makif. Now, this discourse, meaning the entire book, B'Shasha Ekdima, which is one long discourse made up of many discourses, started off to explain that when the Jewish people said, by the giving of the Torah, Nasav and Ishma, we will do and we will hear, Hashem delivered crowns to them. The angels came down and gave them crowns. The crowns are an Or Makif. So to appreciate the Or Makif, he first contrasted that with the Or Pnimi. So it's almost like everything we learned till now was kind of a parenthesis. And now he says, however, now let's get to appreciate what is the Or Makif, the encompassing light. And that was the last 226 classes. Or maybe 227. I don't know. I'll have to take a look which class. This might be 228 or 227. All right. Now, Amnam, this is the word. Amnam. Now, the truth is, this discourse that we're going to complete, and I mentioned in the last class, this discourse, the 12th discourse, really in essence, is still going to continue explaining the Or Pnimi. However, the beginning of the shift from the Or Pnimi to the Or Makif, to the encompassing lights, happens in the next few phrases. But then he still has a throwback to the Or Pnimi until he concludes this discourse. So the next probably 10, 15 classes. And then afterwards, in the next discourse, Parshas Ekev, is when we're going to go full throttle Or Makif, encompassing lights. Okay. However, this is like a few lines into chapter Memvav. Chenas Or Makif, the Or Makif, u'she'ene bo b'chenas eslapshus b'kelim. The Or Makif is a type of light that doesn't enclose itself in any vessels. Because the Besharsha Yemakaira, in its root and in its source, in the infinite light that's before the Tzimtzum, Hu Ha'or, this is the light, Shebebchenas Ein Sof, that is really Ein Sof. It's not curtailed. It's not meant Ubebchenas B'li Gvul, and really B'li Gvul, really without any limitation. So this is important to understand. When he's talking about Or Makif over here, encompassing lights, versus Or Pnimi, he's talking about our Or Makif, and every world is an Or Makif. And for example, around the world of Asiya, there is Or Pnimi that comes into the world of Asiya, the world of completion, which are the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Of Asiya, of our world. And around it is an Or Makif, is a Sovev to the world of Asiya. The same is in the world of Yetzirah. There is an Or Pnimi, and the same, there is an Or Makif. Take a look at our own souls. The nefesh, ruach, neshama, the levels of the nefesh, the ruach and neshama. These are levels of Or Pnimi, and then within each and every one of us, we have a makifim of our neshama, which is the Or Makif. Okay, and the same is in the world of Bria. There is the Or Pnimi, the Esespheres of the world of Bria that we discussed actually in this Maayor earlier. How the Esespheres, the 10 spheres of the world of Bria, are much lower and inferior to the Esespheres of Atzilus, but there is Esespheres, the 10 spheres in the world of Bria, in the world of creation, and around them is the Or Makif. And of course, in the world of Atzilus, there's the Esespheres, and the Keser of Atzilus is an Or Makif. Now, all these levels of Makifim, they're all after the Kav. That means that all the light and all the revelation that happens in this entire system, evolution and system, on the entire Seder Ishtalshalos, the entire evolution of worlds, including the Or Pnimi and the Or Makif, are all derivatives from the Kav. So why are we saying over here that the Or Makif is really believable? Hold it, you said already that the Or HaKav, which is the source from where everything is coming from, has already a relationship to Gevul, to limitation. So it's important to understand that we have to recognize the entire time there is the micro and the macro. And even though we are speaking in the micro, which means we're talking about our small little makifim, our makif lights, but the micro is rooted in the macro, which means like this. In essence, if you look at the entire big system, the Or Makif, the encompassing light that we're talking about, is above the Kav. It's before the Kav. It's the Or Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. And in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, it's the real source of the Or Makiv is the higher level of the Or Ein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. And that is utterly above the Kav. And when the Kav, when that thread of Or Ein Sof re-engages in the empty space, in the Cholol, to illuminate and to produce worlds and so on and so forth, it doesn't capture in it any of the Or Ein Sof of the level of this level of the Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof A is not captured in the Kav. The Kav is only deriving itself and pulling from, like it's drawing from the nether part of the Or Ein Sof, the Or Ein Sof B, the lower level, the Esespheres Agnuzos. That's what's translating into the Kav. So that's the real level of when we talk about Or Makif, the Or Ein Sof. However, being that we're not possible to touch anything of the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, so we engage with everything from the Kav and onward. Everything that comes to us is from the Kav, not before the Kav. However, being that Hashem wants to create the entire system of the universe with Or Pnimi and Or Makiv, with these two dimensions, which is, we're not going to explain that right now, but that's the system, that's what Hashem wants. So even post-Kav, when the Kav delivers and produces an Or Makiv, an encompassing light to surround the next stage of existence, the next world, before the Kav is going to produce the 10 spheres of the next world, the Kav is going to blow out like a bubble, a burst out, give a puff of an Or Makiv. In truth, that Or Makiv that's now coming out is reflecting the initial Makif, the Or Makiv. In other words, somehow, the Kav is carrying down into the post-Tzimtzum traces of the real Or Makif of Or Ein Sof A. The Kav communicates from elements of the divine that are above the Kav. In other words, even though the Kav, as it's in its essence of what Kav means a thin line, and the notion of it being a thin line, meaning a linear line, like linear. Its idea is, in essence, Or Pnimi is internal light. Yet, since the Kav is the communicator of all godliness, through the Kav, traveling in the Kav is also energies that are representing the concept of Or Makiv, which when the Kav is communicating them, the Kav is not giving you what the Kav is about. The Kav is a courier and carrying something that's above the Kav. What's it carrying? It's carrying lights from Or Ein Sof A, from the real level of Or Ein Sof, and that translates through the entire system as the Makif of every level, including all the way down to the Makif of Asiyah, and even the Makifim of our own individual neshamas. Our Chaye Yechida, which are the two levels of Makifim, of encompassing lights of our own neshama, in essence, what they really mean, is that they're rooted in the Makif of all Makifim of the Or Ein Sof A. So that's something important. So that's why you see over here when he says like this, Or Makif, when he says, however, the Or Makif, when he says this Or Makif, he means not only the Or Makif in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. He means every Or Makif. The idea of an Or Makif is that it hovers above the vessels. It does not go into vessels. Why is that? Mishum, because the Bishar Shayu Mekairoi. If it's essential DNA, its root, its source, from where it comes, not now. Now, of course, these Makifim, if they would be Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum, they would never be able to be post-Tzimtzum. They would never be able to be here. They wouldn't be shaykh to the world. They wouldn't have any relationship to us whatsoever. They would burn all of existence in an instant. So everything we have is coming through the Or Hakav, and therefore limited. And however, there is a taste. There is an aspect over here that is reflecting since these are makifim lights, what they stand for and what they're like symbolizing is the real or, and that's their shirish. That's really where they come from. Their root and in their source. But in the Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. Now, hold it. The Kav also is rooted, and the Or Panimi, the Kav, which is Or Panimi, internal light, and containing with self all the Or Panimis, all the lights, all the neshamas that go into vessels, is also rooted in the Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. But he differentiates. In the Orein Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum, where is the Or Makif coming from? Hu Or Shebebchinas Ein Sof. It's rooted in the Or that's Ein Sof. Ubebchinas Bli Gvul, and in the Bli Gvul of the Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum. Not in the subtle Gvul that's in the Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum, which is the root of the Kav, which later is the root and the shorish of every Or Panimi. So, and again, what we have to realize is that there are two systems over here. A system of Panimi and a system of Makif. And even though we will engage with these Makifim after they are already curtailed some degree or affected by the Tzimtzum and coming through the Kav, but in essence, we're touching, through these Or Makifim, we're touching the pure Orein Sof that's before the Tzimtzum, that doesn't have any relationship to the worlds at all. For who, as he says, the idea of this level of Orein Sof is the revelation of the essence of the Ein Sof. Sheme'eno etzem, it's a revelation of the essence that is similar to the essence. Unlike Orein Sof B, which is a revelation of the essence, but not similar to the essence. Because if it would be similar to the essence, it wouldn't have esespheres agnuzais. It wouldn't have 10 hidden potentials. Because that's not real Bli Gvul. That has already some type of a hagbala, some type of a limitation. We've explained earlier in chapter 16 and in chapter 27 that even the lower level of the Orein Sof is still Orein Sof. It's Orein Sof. It's before the Tzimtzum, but it's another level of the Orein Sof, and he calls that over here the Sharshei Ha'oros, the roots of the light. Which lights? Of the lights of the Esespheres, not the Or Makifs. The root of all the lights of the spheres. Meaning, what he's contrasting is not the Kalim. The Kalim for sure are rooted in Gvul and limitation, whatever. But even the lights, which we might have thought is pure, it's rooted in pure Orein Sof. He says no. The Shorshei Oros, what's the Shorish of the Oros? The Esespheres Agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres. Hem gam came meyuchadim be'etzem. They're also unified with the essence. It's all part of the Orein Sof, which is completely one with the Ein Sof himself. And even higher, one with Atzmos. Shazeu Inyan, and this is why we say regarding Hashem's name, and every name, you see, Hashem's revelation as he reveals himself to himself, for himself, is not really called a name, because the main idea of a name is to reveal yourself to someone else. So when we say Hashem's name, so there are various different names, which are the names of the light, the oiros of the spheres, or as we discussed earlier, remember we learned that the ability to connect the lights to the vessels, that's the name. Okay, I'm not going to go into it, but there is the names. And then amongst the names, there is Shmi HaMiyuchad Bi. There is the name that is real, the essence of the name of Havaya, which is Hashem's very, very personal name. And when we say Havaya, over here we mean Havaya de Liela, the higher name of Havaya, as Havaya is mamish, one with the Orein Sof. But even that, if it's Havaya, it's the source of 10 spheres, because that's Yud Kei Vav Kei, 10 spheres. So, but which level of 10 spheres? Esa spheres agnuzais. This is the way it's totally one with Hashem. So it's connected to him. It's his name. Shmi HaMiyuchad Bi. It's unified with it. However, it's already at Tzimtzum. So if you remember, we discussed it's like the tzitzis coming from the talis. The talis, the garment, the great talis. We don't have a mitzvah of a talis and tzitzis. Talis is the garment, which represents Or Makiv, which in its source of sources represents the higher level of the Or Ein Sof. And then there is the kanfei bigneim, which are the fringes that come on the corners. The fringes that come on the corner represents Or Pnimi. It's a fringe. We learned a very important halacha. What's the halacha? That you can only make the tzitzis from the same type of material the talis is. So if you have a polyester talis, you have to make polyester tzitzis, kind of in concept. Besides wool, you can make with all of them, but in general, you can't make polyester, what's it called again, garment and cotton tzitzis. It wouldn't work. But polyester or cotton tzitzis cotton talis with cotton tzitzis would be okay. We don't do that. We keep the tzitzis wool all the time. I'm not going to get into how that works, but the concept is that tzitzis have to be mimin and has to be from the same type of the kanaf. So what does that reflect? That is showing you that even the Or Pnimi is unified and one really with the Or Makiv. And it's all unified with the Eibishter himself, with God himself. Then min hakanaf, it's the min of the kanaf. Mikol makoim, notwithstanding that it is one and with the Or Ein Sof and with the Ein Sof himself, it still has a limitation. Why? Because this light, humashashir Or Ein Sof, is what the Or Ein Sof is evaluating and estimating to illuminate for the world. Within himself, he's preparing a light that can be tolerated by the world. And that's why we say that this light has already, in an undetectable way, but it has 10 spheres. Like we discussed, that's the idea of 10 spheres. Hagnuzais. Mishum. The klolis ha'or hu leheres ha'olamais. Because the general element of this level of light is meant to illuminate the worlds, which is not the case with the Or Makiv, which is not about the illumination of the worlds, but rather an emanation to express the source. It's not to communicate to anybody. It's just about revelation. But however, the root of the Or Pnimi, the root of the Kav, and all of that's meant to be received by the worlds. The Lulei ha'olamais, and if not for the worlds, einam shaichem b'chinas ha'elu klal. These bechinos, which is 10 spheres, don't have any shaychas, which means God doesn't have any reason to have 10 spheres. It's the whole concept of 10 spheres in its highest state is already Hashem bending to the worlds. It's the Or Ein Sof, but it's the Or Ein Sof bending to creation, tilting himself to creation. And that's what's going to be the rest. And the rest of the Maamor, remember, is going to be explaining why the entire concept of these 10 spheres, from Chachma to Malchus, is all in relationship to creation. It means if not for a creation, there is utterly no need for these 10 spheres. For God's self and for his perfection, so to speak, there's no perfection with these 10 spheres. These 10 spheres are not necessary at all. It's only out of the notion to make worlds. Now, and he's going to now specify that that's going to be, again, the content of the rest of the discourse until Parshas Ekev is going to be why the Esespheres are shayach la'olamais, are connected to the worlds. Now, and he's going to work his way from the bottom up. He's going to start with Malchus. Malchus is for sure about creation. The whole idea of a king is creation. Then he's going to work his way higher and say that the emotions, which are higher than Malchus, although they are more of an internal experience, not so much about the outside, but they're also about the outside. And then he's going to climb and go, and he said that even the moichin, even intelligence, we would think intelligence has nothing to do with the outside. Intelligence is for yourself. It's your intelligence. He's going to explain how by Hashem, the intellect is completely unnecessary for himself, and it's only to impact the worlds for the element. Therefore, the entire set of 10 spheres, which begins in the Esa Sphira Sagnuzais, is because Hashem wants to reveal himself to worlds. That's the theme of the entire rest of the discourse. And then he's going to come back in the next discourse and say, however, the light where Hashem is not considering worlds, where it's not about, is just pure self-revelation, unrelated to revealing for something. Obviously, we'll have to discuss. So what does that mean? What does he have to reveal? Okay, so obviously there's going to be a lot to learn. And here he proves that idea, that the entire concept of Esa Spheros, in their deepest, highest, innermost state, as they are above the Kalim, above the Tzimtzum, there's Esa Spheros, it's only for the sake of creation. As stated in Zohar, Pashas Pinchas Definition of Zayin obeys the Ihu Iskeri Chacham, that Hashem is called wise, B'chol Mina Chachmas, with every type of wisdom, V'choyshev Sham Kala Esa Spheros. And then the Zohar over there enumerates not just Chachma, but all the 10 spheres. And he's called that way. And that's for it's for the creation. And then it goes and it continues like this. Elakoidem debara alma. But even before he created the world, Iskeri, he's already called Iskeruhu. He is called the Chol Inin Dargan with all these names. But why? Al Shem Biryan the Havasidin Libaris. He's only named with those names before he creates the worlds. It's future because of the creation that he's going to create. The Eloi Baryan the Alma. If not for the creation of the world, Amai Iskru Rachum. For what purpose is he called compassionate? V'hainu, what does that mean? Shekol Esa Spheros, all the 10 spheros, and L'tzaydacha Olamais, is only for the sake of the worlds. And here he starts the exploration. He will work his way from the bottom up. From Malchus, and then Midos, and then even Mochen is only for the worlds. All right, we'll leave it over here.